Okay, today, kind of got a close up on the back of the camera because I want to show you some things we have to learn and understand so we can get in manual mode. Um, and I'll explain as we go on here why it's so important that we do learn our camera and we do get in manual mode so we can make images that are what we see them as and what we want them to be. When we're shooting in auto, we're giving our camera way too much control over the image, and which means the image is not always what you think it should be, and you're disappointed when you see it. So we have three things that are going to control most of manual mode. So people are scared to death of that M in the manual mode. There's only three things here. So the first thing simply is your shutter speed. So basically, we all probably understand shutter speed, but the shorter the time that the shutter is open, the less light is let in, and the more it's going to freeze that motion. So for me, and the type of shooting I do, this is most likely the most important number that I have. And we talked about that last time when I talked about shooting wildlife. This is what freezes the motion. We have to match this to what we're doing. So if I'm shooting a tree in the middle of a field and it's a landscape, I don't have to be 1/2000th of a second unless the wind is blowing, which if the wind is blowing, you should probably wait till the wind stops blowing before you take a picture of that tree. But this is, when I want to freeze a bird's wings, I need 1/2000th or 1/1600th or whatever that is to match the speed of that animal or person or whatever it is that I'm trying to freeze motion. So this one's a big deal. The next one is the aperture, which is your depth of field. And this one gets confusing for people and gets difficult because the terms used for it are sometimes backwards in your head. So when a photographer says maximum aperture, it is meaning how much light can be let in, and each lens is going to be different. How much light can be let in to change these other two numbers to achieve the photo we want. So the confusing part is maximum of f2.8. This lens has a minimum of f32. So it sounds backwards because we're talking how much light can be let in, but the number itself goes down when we talk about maximum, and the number goes down when we're talking about how much light is let in. So you just have to learn maximum aperture is the lowest this number can be, which is the lowest depth of field that can be accomplished by the lens, which in turn is the most light let in. So that's why when you see f2.8, a lens that can achieve that, the same focal length lens, 200 millimeter with an f4, might literally be $1,000 less because it takes a lot of quality of glass to achieve that lower number, and a bigger elements and more elements to let that much more light in. So we have shutter speed, aperture, how long the shutter is open. So this is going to control our light. It's also going to control whether we freeze motion, blur motion, things like that. So we're controlling that with this. We're controlling the depth of field with this number. How much of the image? If we want a portrait and we want the background all blurry and nice looking, we want this at f2.8, or some of you might have like the 75 to 300 kit lens that comes with some of those. So that's going to put you, I think, like f5.6 is the lowest that goes to, the maximum aperture. But you can learn those things and you'll understand them more when you do. But so we want a portrait, f2.8, whatever the shutter speed needs to be. So if somebody's moving, we need to be 1/200th or 1/320 or something a little faster to freeze that motion. And the third over here is your ISO. So this is light sensitivity. And this one can get difficult because most all cameras have a different quality and a different look when the ISO goes up. This is a full frame 5D. This is a good low light camera. It can handle high ISOs, in other words, high sensitivity of light without getting a lot of noise. That's the trade-off of ISO. So we're simply thinking, well, we need a fast shutter, and we need to let all that light in. We want a little depth of field, So we'll just let ISO go as high as it wants to so that we can achieve those. The problem is we're going to introduce digital noise, which ruins a picture. Digital noise also is introduced afterwards. If you underexpose an image and then you're trying to save it and you're adding so much exposure to it digitally, whether it's your phone, your camera, the software you're using, that image gets noisy and grainy and it looks bad. It's not good. So ISO, aperture, shutter speed. One of the things with ISO that you can do to kind of see where your camera falls in that range is take some test photos of the same subject in the same light, shoot it at 1600 ISO, 2500 ISO, 3200 ISO, go all the way to 20-some thousand ISO or whatever yours does, and just look at those digital images and start to see that noise and where you feel comfortable with the quality of image going there. You really need to know that. You need to know it before you get out in the field, because the worst thing you can do is get these two, get the shutter speed right, get the depth of field right, and you're so proud of yourself and you finally did it. You're in manual mode and you have a bunch of digital noise in the image and it doesn't look good because you let this get to 6400 and your camera and your lens and your setup, it can't handle that. And that's just based on your sensor, but I don't want to go into a bunch of technical stuff, but that's how that is. The better the sensor, the more it can handle. So ISO, light sensitivity, how much light is being, that sensor is grabbing basically. Aperture, how much of the subject is in focus. Portraits, f2.8, you're going to blur out the background, it's going to look real nice. If we're doing a landscape or something, we need a lot of the in focus, we could do f11, f13. You go much over that, things start to get soft, they don't look as good. And your shutter speed, which plays into those as, how long that light is in there. And you have to figure out these three and how they work together to be in manual mode so you can start to understand. Auto mode is fine, and you like some of the photos you get from auto mode, but auto mode is guessing your light sensitivity, guessing your aperture, and guessing your shutter speed. So guess. That's not making the image you want. So we have to get these in manual mode, and you need to control these three numbers and understand and learn them so you can control what the results are. So there's hybrid modes like sport mode and landscape mode, and all those are doing is putting your camera in, sport mode is probably getting you like 1/300th or 400th or 500th of a second, and then it's compromising on the other two, but it doesn't know what aperture you want. It doesn't know that you want one person isolated and blurred out. It doesn't know that. So it's focusing on getting them clear, but how much information, and then it's also guessing on your ISO, guessing what your camera can handle without doing the research. So these are the three that we have to start to get better at, and I'll do more videos on them. So shutter speed, aperture, ISO. These three make your picture. Learn these and learn which of these is the most important in your image. If we're talking wildlife, sports, things like that, shutter speed to me is always the most important thing. It doesn't matter what I do with these two. If I don't have this one right, I have a really nice, beautiful picture of an eagle flying over that's all blurry because I got this one wrong. Landscape. This one is usually most important. We have to find the sharpest image we can, f13, f11, something like that, to get all the data as clear as we can. If we got this one right in landscape and this one wrong, you're going to have a sharp, clear picture of one tree that this happened to focus on, and the rest of the background is blurry. You could take a picture of a sunset at a low aperture like this, f2.8, you happen to focus on a tree, you can't even see the sunset, it's just blurred out, it's no good. The ISO is going to turn into and play into these, and we already know we have to know what our maximum is and acceptable levels of that so that we can control these other two with that and not introduce noise. So shutter speed, aperture, ISO, and we'll talk more about those in the future, and you need to start learning those and understanding those so we can get in manual mode and we can have a better control over our images. Thank you.